sat here in a cafe in Cambridge with Beth Singler, who's a PhD student here in Cambridge. And you're studying something which is some people might have heard of and some might not, which is Indigo Children.
Yes. Probably, I'd say more people have not heard of the Indigo Children.
I certainly hadn't a couple of years ago. Because I started
and so certainly my experience of when I start to talk about them and people's eyes glaze over slightly, or they start thinking, is this some sort of pop band I've not heard of before? So do you want a brief introduction to
Yeah, that'd be useful to find out what they are.
Yeah. So very simply, a woman in the late 70s, early 80s called Nancy Ann Tapp first identified the Indigo Children as a specific generation that were arriving at that time, who were here to bring about what you would know as the New Age, which is probably a more familiar concept.
Yeah.
They're described as more spiritually evolved, more psychically able, sometimes even more genetically evolved as well. There's some genetics.
So there weren't people who'd always been there but been ignored. There was a special new generation to usher in the age of Aquarius or a New Age, or
when the idea first was explored by Nancy Ann Tapp, that was certainly how it was. That she was saying this is a very distinct generation being born with an indigo aura. That's where the term comes from. She was someone who could claim to be able to see auras. And prior to the indigos, there had been other colours, sort of following the colours of the chakras. If you're familiar with New Age thought about chakras, that the more materialistic, physical auras are the lower colours in the rainbow. And as we move up, we go red, orange, yellow, green, blue, up to indigo being the kind of colour of the third eye and that chakra. And therefore, the Indigo Children are intrinsically linked with psychic ability in that description of them.
So that's the idea of kind of what they were, and presumably, at least among some people, that idea kind of caught them and kind of took off a bit.
Very much so. I mean, within the New Age movements, there's several different authors who've picked up this idea and run with it and come up with other iterations and variations as well. So you don't just have indigos, you also have, I won't give you a complete list, but I think I've identified around 20 different variations of so indigos, crystals, rainbows, blue rays, dolphins, and so forth. It carries on.
So there's a kind of lot of scope there, but also presumably people who took it very seriously at the time and were at the same point in their life of having children, it might have an impact on how they view those children, how they brought them up. And
absolutely. I mean, the classic indigo description of someone who's here to break down the current paradigm. But if you're someone who's here to change the current paradigm of civilization, you don't necessarily therefore fit into mainstream society. You find it difficult, particularly in things like schooling and education, in your behaviour, which is can be interpreted your behaviour as being problematic. Therefore, so indigo child rhetoric is often about how things like autism and ADHD are actually misdiagnoses.
So they can be markers or flags
of being indigo. I mean, this is the insider narrative of what an indigo
so
child is.
Children who seemed like outsiders, didn't fit in at school, struggled with authority or systems, that could well, because of this kind of narrative about indigo, be seen as that. So if parents kind of felt that may have been true, what did they do? What was the next step?
I mean, the succession from Nancy Ann Tapp was various different authors who produced books called things like The Care and Feeding of Indigo Children, providing practical things you could go out to take care of these children that you have. I mean, aimed specifically more at parents at that stage. So things like holistic healing, nutritional advice, energy healing, basically ways of helping indigos deal with modernity and all those aspects like junk TV and food that would.
So kind of almost like a mini industry around how to successfully. I mean, that was a time anyway of radical ideas like child rearing and experimentation around that anyway. So we didn't paint it as too abnormal in cultural currents.
It's definitely an offshoot of some of the things you may have heard of, like attachment parenting, or broadly holistic styles of parenting as a wider thing. And there have been people who've described it as an indigo economy, even within the kind of collective, if you want to use that term itself, that there have been obviously reactions to the indigo economy and saying this is cynical in some way, and so taking a very true interpretation and monetising it.
Yeah,
but there's a wider debate.
And the whole debate about that within the New Age kind of movement about kind of
religion.
Absolutely about kind of commerce and consumerism related to religious life. The question that interests me as an outsider, and I think when I mention it to students and people, they always want to ask is, what happened to those children?
What happens to them?
Yeah, there's the kind of end of the story bit.
Well, there is really no end of the story because they grew up and some of them either drifted away from the idea or they had children of their own who they then either interpreted again as indigos or, like I said, these following interpretations. So the primary following interpretation is crystal children, who appear around 1995 according to the primary text. So you could potentially be an indigo giving birth to a crystal, or subsequently a rainbow and various other types. Or, more interestingly, I found in my research, is that you can be an adult who never was called an indigo, but you can see the definition when you're an adult and retrospectively decide
you weren't recognised.
You weren't recognised as an indigo as a child, and therefore you're now an indigo adult.
Yeah. And presumably, I wouldn't know, but there are people who are brought up within that context who didn't follow down that route and rejected it, or
yes, absolutely. There's
went down a different path.
A particular example of that. There's a book, and then a film called The Bling Ring, which is
Bling Ring.
The Bling Ring. It's quite hard to say. It's an account of a criminal group of youngsters in California in Los Angeles who invaded celebrities' houses and stole from them. Primarily the celebrities they aspired to be like such as Paris Hilton's. And within the Bling Ring, one of them was described by her mother as an indigo child, and yet she sort of rebels against this slightly.
So
although, to begin with, within the book and the film, she accepts it, and then the author returning to her later, she's moved slightly away from the definition and doesn't see herself as an indigo anymore.
But it's still kind of in the general sense of active. Yeah, still kind of active part of that kind of subcultural.
I think it's certainly very active online, which is the primary place where most of my research takes place. What's interesting is that around 2006 there was a media interest that bloomed. So you get articles by John Ronson in The Guardian about the Indigo Children, and you also get books like The Complete Idiot's Guide to Indigo Children, published in about 2006, where it gets to the mainstream enough that we get a Complete Idiot's Guide. That mass media interest has died down a little bit, but maybe, maybe come again.
Well, yeah, it sounds like the kind of thing that could catch somebody, a filmmaker or a writer's imagination. Yeah. And the last thing I wanted to ask you about that was, I've seen this other phrase on the internet, starseed.
Yes, starseed.
I wasn't sure the relationship between indigo children and starseed.
It's complicated because they're not necessarily a starseed may not necessarily be a following iteration of an indigo, but it's certainly a very similar concept. So starseed is when your soul comes from another constellation primarily, or from another dimensional realm. It's quite various, but the idea that you're not necessarily from this planet previous to this life.
So some people could interpret indigo children having kind of starseed identity, but you don't necessarily see an overlap that has to be the same.
It's quite various. So some people do say starseeds are a form of indigo child, and others say that they're not. So this is one of the problems with all these different labels that are used. I tend to subsume them under indigo child for my thesis and my research because that's simpler.
Yeah,
it's not.
And they share, I imagine, a lot of features that kind of replicate what you're interested in.
I mean, the other alternatives I had is there's an author called Losi who calls them the children of now, and within that she talks about starseeds and angels on earth and beautiful silent ones and all these other variations. But I think writing something about the children of now sounded a bit too emic to me, so I called them the indigo children.
Yeah, I think that seems like it kind of captures. Yeah. But I think if people want to find out more, obviously it sounds like the internet is the place to go, and there's lots of stuff. Thanks ever so much.